I'm Blair Best. It's Tuesday here on The Story, and tonight, the bill in Salem to help fund the construction of a baseball stadium in Portland took a step forward. We'll tell you what's next. Plus, the Washington County Auditor calls some spending by the sewer agency there excessive and embarrassing. We talk with the reporter who broke that story. But first, a follow-up on my story from last night that focused on empty detox beds in Portland. And let's just say the plot thickens. It's our big story tonight.
We more often have open beds in our withdrawal management unit than we are full. And that has been consistently the case for over a year now, well over a year.
That was the chief medical officer at Fora Health, one of just 2 large-scale treatment and recovery centers in Portland. They routinely have empty detox beds, which seems crazy, right? I mean, I've done countless stories talking with people struggling with addiction on the streets. Well, doctors and nurses at Fora Health don't know why they're seeing fewer people seeking withdrawal management. But staff there tells me there needs to be more recovery housing, also known as sober living, places they can send people after they go through detox. Because what happens now is people are repeatedly getting discharged from detox to the streets, and the cycle of drug use often starts all over. So it seems obvious that more recovery housing is needed. However, and this is where the plot thickens, this morning, I heard from providers who work in recovery housing, and they tell me they have empty beds too, but for different reasons.
If you're coming into a house, I want to make people feel human.
For people like Troy McChesney.
Right now, though, with the funding shortage, I have 2 empty beds here.
An empty bed.
So up here we have another bonus room, and I have 3 empty beds up here.
Means one thing.
Well, it saddens me because my whole thing is I want to be able to help people.
He's got 6 empty beds in this Southeast Portland home.
Just sitting here vacant, waiting for people to come in.
Troy runs Premier Sober Living, which has 8 recovery homes like this one across the city. And it's not cheap.
It's somewhere around $750
per bed per month. Typically, Troy would rely on money called flex funds to cover that cost. That's money from coordinated care groups like CareOregon, a nonprofit health insurance agency funded by public programs like Medicaid and Medicare. They tell us they've created a stricter application process for these flex funds in an effort to reduce waste and fraud.
And then I was able to utilize those funds so then they can stay in housing for a duration of 3 months, essentially as an operational cost to be able to help support them in this process.
Troy says since August of 2024, he has not been able to access that money.
All of these flex funds disappeared, and it was just overnight.
Meaning he now might have to close some of his recovery homes.
I think that there's a lot of people that are going to suffer from that. I mean, I was looking at potentially putting about 100 people into homelessness.
And that, he says, has been the case for some.
Yeah, there's people that I've had to say, hey, I can't carry you anymore. These funds didn't come in. You have to go back to the streets. They return to use, they return back to detox centers and repeat the cycle.
That almost happened to Anthony Cook.
I'm here for a week and they tell me your funding didn't go through, so we need you to pay $750 to stay here in the program. Luckily I was able to come up with the money. It's due again today, so I'm going to be trying to come up with another $750 so I can stay because the program's amazing.
What happens if you can't find the $750?
They'd kick me out. They'd give me a 24-hour notice. So.
What do you think about that?
I think it could put me in a bad situation, on the streets again in Portland. My trap house is only a couple blocks from here, so.
It's devastating that just because people don't have $700 to move in, that they're turned away.
At West Coast Sober Housing, Solara Salazar tells us that happens every single day.
20 to 30 people per day we turn away.
All due to a lack of funding.
So we have 73 beds total right now, and we have 30 open beds that we could serve people today if there was housing funding.
Prior to losing the CareOregon flex funding, she housed people under the impression it would be reimbursed.
I think when all was said and done, we were left $34,000 in the hole, and never saw a dime from any of the applications.
And getting that money back has been no easy feat.
You know, I think here I have like almost 30 different reasons given for denials.
I know 30 different sober living organizations that lost money due to the change in the flex funds.
We really just want a clear answer. You know, like, should we keep trying to, you know, access HSRN funds for recovery housing? Or do we need to look at alternative funding sources or shutting down housing? So the word is out there. People on the streets know that they can't get housing after detox. So in their mind, why even bother?
CareOregon declined our request to go on camera today, but they did send us a statement. It says, because sober housing is not a covered Medicaid benefit, but a need for some of our members, CareOregon pays for these services through an innovative program called Health-Related Services Flex Funds. CareOregon continues to pay for sober housing services when these services meet our communicated criteria and with the required documentation. They went on, saying, due to concerns about fraud, waste, and abuse in this space, CareOregon has made adjustments to our HRSF process in an effort to keep these services available while being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. So the money is there, it's just harder for providers to access with more hoops for them to jump through. As you heard from that one provider earlier, she says she's received dozens of different denial requests for the funding from CareOregon. I mean, she's documented them right here on this paper. And as she said, she just wants a clear answer. Okay, so now it is your turn to weigh in. Let us know what you think about this saga of empty detox and recovery housing beds. Email us, thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, turning now to an update on a story you all had a lot to say about last week, building a Major League Baseball stadium on Portland's South Waterfront and changing part of a law from 2003 to help pay for it. Well, this week, Senate Bill 110 passed out of committee and now heads to the full Senate for discussion and a vote. If it becomes law, it would allow for up to $800 million in bonds to pay for a stadium, to be repaid over 30 years with a jock tax, which is an income tax on the MLB teams and players' staff. Lawmakers held a work session on the bill yesterday, which lasted well over an hour, hearing from people for and against a stadium in Portland. Now, one person who says the stadium would be good for the city is Multnomah County Commissioner Julia Brim Edwards.
As elected officials, we have to make tough decisions on a regular basis. But fortunately, this isn't one of those cases. If it were a fly ball, my boys would call it a can of corn. The economic benefits of bringing a baseball team to Oregon are significant. We've seen the Blazers, the Timbers, the Thorns, and the impact they've had on the regional and Oregon economy. Oregon is already the global capital of the athletic footwear and apparel industry, and the professional baseball team will build on that economic engine. As Portland and Multnomah County get back on track, supporting economic growth is a priority, as is continuing to attract people to live, work, and visit Portland.
Also in support, former Oregonian sports writer Dwight James, who said a stadium would attract a lot more than just baseball.
There might be NCAA tournaments there. There might be UFC, boxing, WrestleMania, whatever. All those people looking for bigger venues. But not only that, the Golden Goose, the concerts. And I would just say, wrapping up, I don't know what Taylor Swift is going to look like 5 or 6 years from now. But see, she's on the radar if you have that ballpark in Portland. Will you get her here? That's the kind of concert that's looking for big, huge outdoor venues in the summer. And we've got that, whether it rains or not.
We shall see. But there was plenty of opposition as well, with people saying they can't stomach the idea of just how much it will cost.
Given all the economic uncertainty in the air with no end in sight, the cuts to federal jobs, mounting trade tensions affecting the cost of living, and the confusion and uncertainty surrounding government-funded state services, which represents nearly a third of Oregon's budget. I think this is a terrible message to send to us Oregonians if this bill passes.
Now, to be clear, Senate Bill 110 would not cost taxpayers anything, in theory. The money to pay back the bonds would come from the team and staff, including visiting teams and staff. And since a stadium is certain to cost way more than just $800 million the bonds would raise, the rest of construction costs would fall on the investors who want a piece of the team, not the state. Now, could the state get involved further down the line? Sure. But as of now, Senate Bill 110 is just the big push to show the MLB that Portland should be considered for an expansion team and that there's a plan in place to get a stadium built. Again, the bill passed committee and now heads to the full Senate. If it passes that chamber, it would still need to pass the House before going to the governor. All right, let's get to a series of stories that we think are worth your time. The Oregonian looked into the spending by Washington County's sewer agency. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars going towards luxury trips to Hawaii and lunches at restaurants around town, all while people in the county have to pay higher rates on their bills. Okay, Jamie Goldberg, a politics editor at the Oregonian, started looking into public records around the agency called Clean Water Services after the newsroom got a tip about their spending. Clean Water Services takes care of the sewer systems in the county. And about 9 years ago, they also formed a subsidiary insurance company. But Clean Water Services decided the insurance company was going to be based in Hawaii and that they would send their executives on a trip there every year.
They based it in Hawaii because they said the business climate in Hawaii was more favorable than the business climate in Oregon or other states that they reviewed. The Hawaii requires that they send at least one board member to Hawaii each year to participate in an annual board meeting. So they would have to have sent at least one person having that captive insurance company based in Hawaii. However, they decided, and they've said it's because they felt it was educational to send board members to this annual conference. They decided to host their board meeting in Hawaii in conjunction with this annual insurance conference, and they sent their entire board to Hawaii every year.
And this wasn't your average business trip. The executives were flying first class and staying in premium rooms at 5-star resorts in Hawaii. The trip in 2023, the Oregonian reports, cost taxpayers $42,000 alone. Now, Goldberg says Clean Water Services justified the cost because their executive director needed ADA accommodations. But Goldberg says she called the hotel where she stayed and they told her that cheaper, accessible rooms were available. Goldberg also looked into how much Clean Water Services was spending on dining, both locally and when they traveled. She found the agency was going out to lunch often, and that over a 5-year period, they spent more than $440,000 on meals. To put that into perspective, they compared how much similar government agencies spent on food. Clean Water Services spent 4 times as much as their counterparts in the city of Portland and Clackamas County during that same 5-year period combined. Now, while all this was happening, people in Washington County got a 4% rate hike on their sewer bills. Goldberg says the auditor in Washington County wants to look into it, but she can't, because Clean Water Services is considered an independent special district under Washington County's charter, not a county agency. Now, there are still a lot of unanswered questions about how much Clean Water Services is actually spending.
Because they were based in Hawaii, they told us that they didn't believe they were subject to Oregon public records law. And the agency itself refused to answer questions for the most part that had to do with the insurance company. So we essentially kept getting referred to the insurance company. We're told we couldn't get records from them. So this was an ongoing conversation back and forth. They did ultimately provide some records, but there are records that we still haven't been able to get. There are 4 trips to Hawaii that agency executives have gone on that we do not know which executives went or how much was spent to send them there. And there were specific receipts that we wanted to look at for the 2023 conference with hotel rooms for certain executives. And because the insurance company said it wasn't subject to Oregon public records law, we haven't been able to access those receipts.
Clean Water Services sent us a statement regarding the Oregonians' reporting, saying Clean Water Services is dedicated to being good stewards of public resources and trust. We take seriously the issues highlighted by the Oregonian and are committed to improvement. The Clean Water Services Board will meet next week to confirm immediate next steps, which we will share with the public once approved. The 3 parts of the investigation are up now on OregonLive.com. Now, whether you live in Washington County or not, it is fantastic journalism and certainly worth your time. Well, coming up next on The Story, as President Trump's administration aims to crack down on illegal immigration, we've heard about the controversy surrounding sanctuary states like Oregon and Washington. But it turns out the drama doesn't stop there. In red states like neighboring Idaho, it's not Republican versus Democrat, but a rift within the GOP itself. And now one of those lawmakers is sounding off. You won't want to miss this one. It's when The Story returns. Well, this next story is all about the current state of politics and how what's happening at the federal level trickles down into state politics. A reporter named Daniel Walters with the Investigate West team dropped a story about how far-right Republican activists have tried to weaponize ICE, or federal immigration authorities, against people who don't necessarily agree with the Trump administration's crackdown. And we've seen this time and time again, mostly Republicans going after Democrats or sanctuary cities. But in Idaho, a far-right activist has targeted a fellow Republican lawmaker. And the controversy has all kinds of twists and turns. And now that lawmaker, who owns several food production and seed potato companies, is going public, talking about the intimidation tactics and the current culture of politics.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
For many people,
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
The second inauguration of Donald Trump
Solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute.
Was a turning point.
Faithfully execute.
For Idaho Representative Stephanie Mickelson,
they showed up at our business, days later.
That point came later that week.
He started targeting me on Tuesday and they were there by Friday.
Representative Mickelson is referring to a January 21st social media post by Ada County GOP Vice Chairman Ryan Spoon, in which he asked the Deputy Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement if he could please send some illegal immigration raids to the businesses owned by Idaho State Representative Stephanie Mickelson. She's been bragging about how many illegals her businesses employ. Representative Mickelson says,
So I was actually home that Friday.
It was an off day during the early legislative session when ICE showed up at one of her eastern Idaho farms.
And then when they couldn't get a hold of me, then they start texting 911, Mom, which means I have to call.
Not coincidence?
I don't think it was coincidence, but, could have been, but I doubt it.
Yeah, they keep pointing to something you said during last session, though.
So what it was is we were having a discussion, and it was a Texas Force style bill, which was already tied up in the courts.
This right here is another key component to us protecting and defending the people of Idaho, and that is protecting the very borders of our state.
So on this particular case, and I feel like this has been happening a lot lately, is we target a certain ethnicity or a certain group, and we want to demonize them.
For debate on motion, Late 32.
It was during the House debate on last session's immigration enforcement bill.
I think you need to remember that every food processor, probably in this state, from the large food processors to the small ones.
But I stood up and I said, I think we need to be really thoughtful before we're passing some of these bills, because I think they have unintended consequences.
So if you guys think that you haven't been touched by an illegal immigrant's hands in some way, through either your traveling or your food, you're kidding yourselves.
So because of that, then they claimed that I had admitted to something which I had never admitted to.
Which is likely what Spoon referenced on January 23rd of this year, calling Mickelson a, quote, plantation mistress, and said, we're going to take your farm slaves away. However, Spoon told Investigate West, quote, her own testimony drew attention to herself.
And the fallacy in all this, every employer out there has to follow the law. But the law is very narrow as far as what we can get, what we can ask, and what we can do. If we don't follow those laws, and if we were knowingly hiring undocumented workers or illegals, you can get a fine of up to $27,000 per employee.
For Representative Mickelson, her biggest worry isn't necessarily her family business,
Double check.
but the chilling effect this had on her ability to do her other job, like when a similar immigration bill came back this session. When this came around for you to stand up and speak your mind on a topic like this, did that change?
This year, I didn't stand up and talk about it.
Why not?
I felt like that I didn't need to make myself and my family and our businesses a bigger target than it needed to be. And so I simply stayed quiet on the issue.
So you've had to change the way you do things?
I did have to change the way I did things, and I had a lot of sleepless nights where I said to myself, if I can't be effective anymore, then maybe it is time, then maybe I need to not be here. I need to do something differently. Or my choice was, I'm gonna have to stand up and find my voice again. And so I finally decided that I'm going to do the best I can do while I'm here. I represent my community, I represent my constituents, I represent the people of Idaho. And if we lose good statesmen in this body, then where will we be?
Is this a bigger problem in this building or in this realm of politics where people feel like they can't say something because they'll get a target on their backs?
I think you're seeing more and more of that, especially in the last couple of years with the rise of social media and confrontational politics. You see this situation where people really think about whether or not they're ever going to make a public statement. Part of the problem with these extremist groups is they've come in, a lot of them have come in from another state, and we welcome out-of-staters to come in and move into Idaho, but to come in and then tell us that they know the Idaho way. The Idaho way is when we have a problem, we roll up our sleeves and we work together and we help our neighbors, or we have differences, but we sit at the table and hammer through what's the best solution for Idaho. But I think until some of us start standing up and saying this is enough. If you want to have a conversation, that's great. Let's not be an anarchist or an arsonist. Let's be an architect. Let's find a good future for Idaho.
Now, according to that Investigate West story, after that January ICE raid of Mickelson Farms, one employee was arrested and sent to an immigration detention center in Las Vegas. Rep. Mickelson says she and her family would never knowingly employ an undocumented worker, saying they follow all federal and state laws. As for Ryan Spoon, the vice chair of the ADA County GOP who called for the ICE raid on Mickelson, he refused to speak with our affiliate about this story. We're back right after this. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great Tuesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.